So I've just finished selling my collection of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Not really selling, more so just rarity downgrading, but technically selling. And in that whole process, I feel like I actually got a lot of what I wanted. I sold it for roughly what I was hoping to get. I also didn't really have a lot of issues in the whole process. It was all pretty seamless. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I personally have done a bit of vending myself. And, I'm just kind of familiar of what buyers are looking for, as well as what I personally was looking for in this process. And I wanted to make this video so I could help you. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of people who are buying and selling collections all the time. And I feel like if you're new to the space of like card games, you can easily get taken advantage of. And so the goal of this video is just for me to talk about what I think you guys can do to help make sure that you get a really good deal when trying to sell your collection, what to think about, what to do, and what to look out for. So, just so you don't get scammed. So in other words, let's just hop right into it. I'm going to break this all down for you step by step so you guys know exactly what to do when you want to sell your collection. Just so you guys know, this applies to literally all card games, not just Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, I don't know for sure, like 100% on the specifics, but this should be a relatively good guide no matter what card game you play. All right, so let's say this is you, and you've got a stack of cards or a binder. You're trying to sell your cards, but you're not really sure where to start. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is gather the cards you're looking to sell, thoroughly check the conditions and quantities of them, and then make a spreadsheet. You want to make a spreadsheet, that way you can show your buyers exactly what they'll be getting. So make sure you include like the set they're from, the rarities, even the conditions, all that stuff. So no one feels misled in this process, and you can maybe find people who are interested by showing exactly what they're getting. You want to eliminate any type of confusion whatsoever. Secondly, you also want to avoid selling bulk or low value cards. Typically, you're going to be cutting off a percentage of your card's value when selling, and we'll kind of get into that a bit later, but that typically means some of the lower value cards are going to kind of get eaten alive by this percentage, and they're not going to really add a ton to the total. So unless you're completely cashing out, like quitting, walking away from the game, my advice would be try to only sell your higher end cards that are going to get a decent chunk out of their sale, even after that percentage comes through, because a lot of those lower end cards will just kind of get completely removed. And if you ever feel the need to buy those cards back later, you might kind of regret selling them because you're just going to take a lot of L's on that. So I personally don't sell low end stuff unless I'm literally completely catching out. And then the third step is going to be find a buyer. And we're going to kind of talk about what that process looks like, how you want to go about doing it. So we're going to move into learning about buyers and what they're looking for, what they're trying to do. So let's just hop right into that. So before you can find a buyer, we first need to talk about what exactly do buyers do? What are they looking for, and how do they kind of work? Like, how do they operate? What makes them want to buy your collection? So first and foremost, buyers move cards. I like to think of them like realtors. They help you quickly sell your collection in the same way if you were selling a house, you would hire a realtor to help you quickly do so in exchange for a percentage of that sale. You sell your collection to a vendor to take in all the value of those cards in exchange for a percentage of those cards' value going to the buyer as profit. This is obviously extremely convenient because some cards are slower and difficult to move. There's always a bit of risk on the seller with like shipping and stuff like that. And you don't always have to take the time to make a store or get on eBay and sell your collection piece by piece. All that being said, it's important to understand that buyers are typically strictly interested in making money. Unless you find someone who genuinely wants your cards for their own personal use, they're likely looking to flip your collection for profit. So please understand and remember, buyers are not your friend. They're strictly thinking of themselves in this process, as a business should, so it's important you stay on your guard to not get taken advantage of. I'm sure you can think of a time when at a locals you saw a kid pull an expensive card out of a pack, and a dude goes up to him and offers them to either pay them very little money or trade something completely worthless by taking advantage of the kid's lack of knowledge on the card's value. This isn't to say buyers are bad people by any means. They just are always going to want to try to make a profit off of people, and they want to increase that profit as much as possible, which is understandable for a business. But just keep it in mind that for the most part, they are kind of trying to take advantage of you in some way. So now that you guys kind of understand how buyers operate and how they think, I wanted to talk about how you go ahead and find one, as well as some of the things to look out for with selecting a buyer. So the first thing to do is, if you want to find a buyer, I typically would advise posting on social media. Weirdly enough, for Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of buyers are on Facebook. So you can post in a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh Facebook groups and stuff. It's one of the main uses for Facebook these days, if I'm being honest. Like, it's like what it's mostly useful for. But beyond that, you can look locally. You can try to sell locally, but the only issue with that is you might have a limited selection of buyers, which also means they can kind of price gouge you on percentage a bit more. So I typically think looking online is going to be your best bet. But if it's going to be like a heavily, like massively large value collection, you're probably going to have to be prepared to fly out and meet that buyer, or fly that buyer to you, or just have a like relatively decent meeting ground for that, because of the fact that you don't want to risk shipping and having them be like, oh, I didn't get it, stuff like that, especially if it's a large sum of money of value in that collection. You're better off just delivering it yourself, depending on how much it is. But one thing you can do to kind of protect yourself, especially on like those Facebook groups, is you can check references. So you can ask your buyer for references. So if you say like, you know, can I get a reference check? People who have done business with that buyer before will typically say that they are a trusted individual. So you can kind of protect yourself in that way. If a lot of people are like, yeah, I've bought cards from this guy before, or I've sold to this guy before, you'll typically know that, okay, that this is relatively safe for me to do. And then some things that I want to tell you to look out for. One of the first ones when it comes to finding buyers on social media is if their account was recently made, then I would typically avoid that person. Like if it said that their account was made this month or this week, or maybe even within the year, I would probably avoid it unless you have like hard references from a lot of people that are like, hey, yeah, no, this guy's legit. Because that's where a lot of people actually get scammed, is there's like people pretending to be someone else. They'll make an account and then like make an agreement that have the cards get shipped and, you know, whatever, do all kinds of stuff like that. That's how scams happen. So just make sure that the account wasn't recently made. And then some things to look out for with the buyers in general is when you make these posts saying like, hey, here's my collection for sale, you will get a ton of DMs. Like, let's be honest, you're going to get a lot of messages from a lot of different people. And one of the biggest things that buyers who are looking to take advantage of you will do is they are going to try to rush you. They want to make you make a quick decision. In other words, they're trying to force a mistake out of you. They want you to sell your collection for less than what it's worth. And you can kind of identify those people pretty easily by just seeing how they operate. One, they're going to move really fast. You know, they're going to like kind of message you really, really quickly. And then, like, you know, you're going to notice a lot of energy behind it, I guess. And the other thing is they're going to actively price gouge. So one thing is on your spreadsheet, if you know you looked up the retail prices, you know, your firm, you know exactly what they're going for. It's pretty common for, you know, buyers to maybe have a few discrepancies here and there with how you're pricing a card. But for the most part, it should be pretty common ground. Like, hey, lowest TCG player is pretty standard for a lot of people, right? So if you're operating on that with how you build your prices, it should be completely fair and fine. However, I don't know where this trend started happening, but I know a lot of buyers will then look at like last one sold, even on cards that haven't really been bought out, that are just kind of old and expensive. So it's like, oh, like last one sold was for like $300 and now it's listed for $500. What I always like to think is I'll check eBay, I'll check all other sources and be like, can you get this for a lower price anywhere else? And if the answer to that is no, then I'm not going to let them do that bullshit. You know, in some cases it's relatively fair, but you know, saying last one sold is something a lot of people do. You just got to make sure, was the card recently bought out? If it wasn't, then you probably know that this is because the card is actually just naturally going up in price. So I don't buy into that. That's just a way for buyers to cut off massive value from cards that you have that have gone up in price over time. So just kind of look out for that. Again, it shouldn't happen a lot. There may be some cases where it might be fair. You know, you got to use your best judgment. But the other thing they're going to do is condition discrepancies. Now, just like with, you know, price discrepancies, there might be an occasional one, but if they're going through your cards and looking at them, one thing I've noticed a lot of buyers who are trying to take advantage of you do is they're going to say every near mint is lightly played and every lightly played is moderately played. They're going to drop it down like a condition no matter what. They're going to do it for, you know, all or most of your cards. And like I said, there's going to be a few discrepancies here and there. So if it's just, a couple cards, that's not a big deal. But if you're very confident in the condition of your cards, which I would recommend using the TCG player condition guide on their website. It shows exactly what, near mint is, what lightly played is. It gives you a good description of it. So use that description in your best judgment to identify the condition of your cards, because that's something that buyers are going to do that are trying to take advantage of you. And you know damn well that when they buy those cards at lightly played, they're going to list them as near mints on their websites or on their stores and stuff like that. So just make sure that you are aware that people do that so you don't get taken advantage of. But yeah, those are the biggest things. So just make sure you guys take your time with this sale. Be open to like a bunch of offers. For example, one thing I've heard before is they say if you're going to entertain other offers, then I'm not interested, or I don't really want to mess with that. That's just them trying to rush you. So don't let them do that to you, right? Like, do not let somebody take advantage of you in that way. Make sure you always consider a bunch of offers and, stay aware of what you can get. That way you don't lose out on a ton of money just because someone tries to make you feel rushed or uncomfortable. And then another thing that a lot of buyers do is they try to get information out of you. So they'll ask you, what's the highest offer that you've been given before they make an offer? And that what they're doing is they're trying to just slightly go above that maybe, or they're trying to, find out if you even have any offers, because if you don't have any offers, then they're going to try to give you a much lower percentage. So how I always handle it is I say, people are still thinking about it, or I'm waiting on a few. I always am very vague with the information I give, because any information you give the buyer, they're typically going to use it against you. Now, if you get an acceptable offer from a buyer, like if you genuinely get a decent one, then it's pretty smart to just be like, hey, like they offered me 9,000, would you do 10? That can be an option when you're getting closer to closing your deal to, make sure that you get as much as you can out of your deal. But just understand that the information you have in terms of offers is precious to you, and you can either use it to your advantage or, let them use it to take advantage of you. So just be kind of careful with what you say in given times. And then my final thing to look out for when selecting a buyer is when you make your post that you are selling your cards, don't put a reason. Do not say, oh, I'm having a kid and I really need the money. Don't say that, I got in a car crash. Don't give any information as to why you are selling. Just say you're looking to sell, because that is one thing a ton of buyers do, is if you convey in any way, shape, or form that you are desperate or in need of money, then that is just a big sign saying, hey, take advantage of me, right? Because that also means that that gives them the information that they can take their time, or they can basically cut you down as far as possible. So whenever you're looking for buyers, just make sure that you never say what it's for. Just say that you're trying to sell your collection, and it is what it is. Don't make it seem like you're desperate for money, even if you are, because at the end of the day, that's just information that those buyers are going to use against you. Take my word for that. I've seen it happen countless times. So now that you've found a buyer, let's say you find someone who seems pretty chill, pretty reasonable. Like I said, go with people with energy that isn't like super fast paced. Go with the people that are like, yeah, I'd be interested. Hey, that sounds pretty good. Go with those chill guys. Once you find that buyer, what you're going to want to do is consider the percentage you're willing to sell at. Now, one thing to note with selling, like what you're selling your collection at, is understand that TCG player, which is what most buyers are going to be selling at, they take a fee of 13% of sales. I mean, I might be a little off on it, but it's like roughly that. At least that's what I've been told from a lot of sellers on that website, is 13% of the sale goes to TCG players. So the other 2% is probably going to go to shipping. So before you can even consider selling your cards, understand that 15% of the retail value of your collection is automatically gone for both you and the buyer, right? Because they're not going to buy anywhere above 85% because of the fact that they're already losing that through shipping and through using the platforms to sell them on. So both you and your buyer are going to be losing that money. So that basically means that between 0 and 85%, you and your buyer need to find a percentage that you are happy with. So we'll go into an example. So when negotiating your percentage or even considering what percentage you're willing to sell at, you really got to think about how much are you willing to pay for convenience. If I have a collection worth $10,000 and 15% is already gone for both parties, that leaves me with $8,500 in value. So how much of that total am I willing to pay in convenience? Buyers want a decent profit margin for their time, so they likely won't pay any more than 75%. And honestly, 75% itself is a pretty rare purchase rate. But think of it like this. If I have the $10,000 collection, I subtract the 15%, I'm at $8,500. If I sell my collection total at 75% retail, I will get $7,500 and my buyers will get the difference in profit after the sale. So $8,500 minus $7,500 equals $1,000 profit to the buyer. I honestly try to calculate what my buyer is going to make off of this sale to kind of, make it feel, I guess, fair to both parties. Like if it's, as long as it's a reasonable amount of money to them, as well as a reasonable amount of money to me, then I think it's a worthwhile exchange. So the ideal range for both parties, in my opinion, is typically going to be between 65 and 75%. The seller is going to push for a higher percentage, buyer will push for lower. In my opinion, I think if the offer is below 65%, that's way too low and you should almost never consider it. But one thing to think about is if you have a lot of cards that are pretty popular, as in get bought and sold a lot, like staple cards or something like that, if that's what majority of your collection consists of, then a higher percentage is pretty fair to ask for, because the buyer, both you and the buyer, should be aware that those cards are really easy to move. But if you have a lot of very niche and like weird cards that don't actually have a lot of applications and therefore don't move very quickly, then it's typically fair for the buyer to ask for a lower percentage, just because it's going to take them a lot more time, energy, and effort to actually sell those cards, and you kind of get the luxury of getting rid of it. In all honesty, if it was up to me, I would say the accepted rate of percentage of sale should just be a flat 70%. So typically for me, when buyers ask me what I'm trying to sell at, I almost always sell them 75%. I don't necessarily expect to get that, but like I said, I think that 75% is kind of on the high end for what you could expect to get. So I always ask for that and just kind of negotiate down between that range, maybe a little bit less than 75, but I rarely go into the 60s just because I think I take way too much of a loss on that value. Again, if you think about it with the $10,000 example, if I were to sell my collection at 65%, then my buyer is making $2,000 off that sale, which, honestly is quite a bit for a $10,000 purchase or whatever like that. So just as a reminder, guys, if at the end of the day you can't reach an acceptable percentage for your collection, like you're aware you can get more, then simply sell it yourself. If that's a better option, that might just be a better option. Maybe going on eBay or TCG Player, making your own little store and just selling it out over time, that might be best for you if you genuinely feel like no one is going to give you a reasonable percentage. Or just taking a step back and just waiting to see if you get more offers, maybe posting the collection a month later and see who's in the market of buying. Because a lot of times, if you don't get an offer now, you will get one later. It just takes time. So like I said, being patient really helps. If you're strapped and you need immediate cash, then my recommendation is just take the highest percentage you can get and just pray that it's a good one. But for the most part, the more time you give yourself to sell the collection, the better you're going to do. And that's also why I talked about losing the 15% from TCG Player, because if you were to try to sell it out individually, you are going to lose that in the same way that your buyer is, which is why you have to operate under that 85% margin of whatever your collection is worth. So to wrap up this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to KirksTrades on TCG Player. They were actually the people who ended up buying my collection, and all of those negative traits I talked about through buyers in my video, none of that applied to them. KirksTrades was absolutely phenomenal to work with. They were really, really nice, super chill with how they went about things, and I really didn't feel super pressured or anything like that. So, moving that collection for me was actually really difficult. It was something I, really wanted to avoid selling at all costs, but when it came down to it and I felt like it was the best decision for me, I was really happy that I went with KirksTrades. I'll put a link to their store in my description if you guys are interested in buying or selling from them. They were phenomenal to do business with, so I just wanted to give a genuine shout out to somebody that I have had a very positive interaction with in terms of buying and selling cards. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, you guys. We're going to give a quick shout out to my Patreons. So shout out to SlapGod, My Dude, Photo Shooty, Brian Ford, and Sven Olbrand. Thank you so much for your support, guys. I genuinely appreciate it. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if this helped you. You know, if you feel like this was a helpful guide, I really hope I can help you guys avoid getting scammed or taken advantage of, because that is way too common these days. So, you know, let me know if this helped. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you guys have a great time doing today.